Well, welcome, panelists, and thanks to all of the students and other audience members who are sticking in. I know there's quite a few who had classes and other work today that are joining just to hear you all on this panel. So this should be a really exciting session. I'm going to make the introductions quite brief, because we want to keep as much time to address Q&A to our panelists today. In order to avoid technical glitches, we did have our current student awardees submit some questions in advance. So our thoughts are to address those pre-proposed questions. And then as always, as per the previous sessions, attendees may submit their Q&A to that part of the Zoom meeting as well. So without further hesitating, I'd like to welcome Dr. Liz Warren, who's the Senior Program Director for the International Space Station U.S. National Laboratory, Mr. Chad Brown, who get ready for this title, y'all, okay? Acting Program Technical Integration Branch Manager, Advanced Planning and Payload Integration Manager for the Exploration Ground Systems Program at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. For those of you who plan on working with NASA, you will soon learn that titles are long and acronyms are wild. Hopefully we won't use too many in this panel today, or if we do, just remind students what those acronyms mean. We have with us also James Ainsworth, who is the Director of Engineering Services over at Collier Research Corporation, which is a HyperSizer software team. James is a graduate from NC State and also a member of our advisory board. And I'm sure that he would love to speak with you today about the collaborative internship program that his company supports along with us. We've got Miss Heather Nelson, who's the Senior Manager for University Relations over at Blue Origin, who is part of the Space Grant family. She used to work for Pennsylvania Space Grants, who probably Zena Cardman, astronaut, also looks quite familiar to you, but she can give you a nice, really good inside scoop of how Space Grant can lead to careers as well. And finally with us, I'm really excited to have Miss Nicole Bonk, who's head of flight testing at Skydio. Skydio is a new corporate friend of ours, and Skydio has already sent to us a number of job openings that they have. So for students who are following us on social media, in the coming days, you're going to start seeing some job openings that may appeal to you. So you're all encouraged to apply. But without further ado, I've asked each of the panelists today to start by just talking a little bit about their own academic and career pathways. And so I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Dr. Warren. We're going to go in the order that we had reviewed earlier. So we'll start with Dr. Warren, who can give us all a little snapshot about herself.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Liz Warren. I have worked in spaceflight research for almost 30 years now. I could not have planned the career that I have had, nor the path that I have taken. But have faith that if this is something you want to do, things will work out. You just make it work. I am a physiologist by training, and I decided to study the effects of spaceflight on human physiology and astronaut health when I was in high school. That's when I decided, oh, that's what I'm totally going to do. And the best part of my job is that I am challenged to learn new things all the time. I read proposals from people that want to do research on the space station. And so I am always outside of my comfort zone. And that's the favorite thing that I can say about my job.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Let's move on to Mr. Chad Brown.
Hi, so my background is a little bit different. I am currently doing the advanced planning, payload integration and management for exploration ground systems. And I was volunteered to accept the program technical integration acting job. Let's see how long that sticks together. But I started my interest in space and aeronautics as a small child. 40 some years ago, we launched the very first space shuttle. I think it was about 12 years old. So I do recall seeing that with my dad, getting up very early, seeing it black and white on small TV. So that sparked my interest. Of course, it also helped with my dad. I was kind of an Air Force brat, and Dad drugged me to Seymour Johnson Air Force Base there quite often to see F-Force launch. I took a different academic path. Of course, I graduated high school, interested in aerospace, got a job as a machinist and worked for quite a few years as a machinist. Eventually realized I couldn't go any higher as a machinist. So I went back to school, went to a couple of schools there and ended up graduating from NC State and accepted a job at NASA as a structural engineer for Launch Services Program and worked my way to the job I'm in today.
Brilliant. That sounds like a really fascinating pathway that I'm looking forward to diving more into moving forward. All right, next we have Mr. James Ainsworth with HyperSizer, also an NC State grad.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so I did graduate from NC State in 2008. I've been working with the same company since I graduated. I moved up here to Virginia shortly after graduation and just started my career. I didn't really know where it was going to go, but started with a software company and ended up making an engineering group within the software company that became very successful. And we're now relocating basically branching off into a sister company and relocating to Raleigh, North Carolina. So we will have an engineering office in Raleigh. I guess as undergrad, I studied aerospace engineering. I ended up focusing mostly in structures and composites, mainly because it made sense to me. When I was a young kid, I used to work with my dad in high school on construction projects and laying tile and doing things like that. So structures just kind of made sense to me. And just really enjoy my job. I get to interface with a lot of different customers. We do have a software product that is commercially available. We sell to NASA. We sell to commercial space launch companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin and all the ones that you probably know, all the big names. So we get exposed to a lot of different projects. And, that's probably the best thing about my job is I feel like I know a little bit about a lot of different projects and I get to scratch the surface. And but once you get too much in the details, I'm like, that's for you to handle. I'll go do something else a little more fun. So anyhow,
Fantastic. And that's a great segue over to Heather at Blue Origin. So thanks for planting that, James, and making my moderator job easy today. So Heather, if you'd like to pick up.
Yeah, well done. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Nelson. I use she, her pronouns. I lead the University Relations team at Blue Origin at our headquarters in Kent, Washington. It's near Seattle. If you don't know about Blue, we're a commercial spaceflight company. We design, build, and fly reusable space vehicles and rocket engines with the goal of lowering the cost of launch. Our vision is to see millions of people living and working in space to benefit the Earth. I've been a spacehead my whole life, specifically interested in literally anything space related. So working at Blue is sort of a dream come true. I attended Penn State for aerospace engineering, but I graduated with a degree in environmental science. I worked in technical research roles for about 15 years before joining the NASA Pennsylvania Space Grant, which Sandy mentioned. I was there for about 5 years, and I was working on a master's in astronomy before one of Blue's propulsion engineers, who I'd known from Penn State, recommended me for the job at Blue. So I've been there for about 7 years. When I started, we were a company of about 300 people, and today we have about 4,000 employees. So it's been a really interesting time for sure. I currently lead a small team of folks responsible for university relations, the internship program, early career, and diversity recruiting initiatives. So I sit within talent acquisition and broader human resources. And I get to connect with faculty and students at universities and help students land their dream job straight out of college. So it is pretty darn fun.
Fantastic. Well, some of you may have seen Nicole a little bit earlier, but she's actually out in the field today as she is a head of flight testing. So oh, there she is. So maybe she'll be able to connect back to us. We've got Nicole just in time. Do you want to say hello to everybody? This is what happens when you're head of field testing.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm on my way.
All right, well, we're having a little bit of trouble with Nicole's audio. Again, I think that's what happens when you're out in the field. So she's a little bit frozen right now. So I think what we're going to do is move on to some of the questions. And if she can get a stable line, we'll hear from her shortly. Okay, panelists, are you ready? So here's what the students wanted to know. So first of all, they are interested in learning what are the most useful skill or skills that you've learned as a student that you use regularly in your current career. And let's start with Liz.
Okay, I love being first because no one's gonna steal my idea first. I'm gonna say resiliency. As students, you know this, you get handed roadblocks all the time. People say no, or this isn't for you, or just what have you. So I think the ability to recover from setbacks, resiliency. And this is a skill that as an adult, it's a little harder. Somehow I feel it was easier to have resiliency when I was younger. And my response when someone put a roadblock in front of me, or if I came across an obstacle, is my reflexive response was go under, over, or through whatever obstacle was placed in front of me, because I had places that I needed to go and needed to be. So resiliency is a key skill to learn.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So Chad, what skill did you learn as a student that you still apply today in your career?
So I'd say my communication skills. So what I've found working at NASA, even when I was working at LSP, we would take very complex problems. I was a structural engineer working on composite structures, taking the side wheel equations and applying those. But when I go to my managers and try to explain the analysis to them, I had to break it down in terms they could understand. And you can't take mathematical equations and put them in a PowerPoint presentation and make or resonate with some managers. So I'd say the skill sets that I've learned and the entire suite of communication classes I've taken in North Carolina, NC State, and a couple of community colleges, I applied that skill set, communicate, break it down to a different level, yet still get the technical message across, was key to my success. Taking that and take a very complex, whether mathematical equation, design reference mission for going to Mars, and turn it into something that could educate my management, inform them what the message is, and apply it to get resources or inside our budget or and things of that nature was key. So communication is one of the better tools that I've applied and I learned while going to NC State.
Great, thanks, Chad. And I have to say, as someone who's dealt in corporate partnerships, I hear that sentiment echoed a lot. You may be a brilliant engineer, but unless you convince your business and legal team that it's a good idea, it might never make it to market. So thanks for that. James, you're up next.
Yeah, I guess, first and foremost, probably the thing that I use most often is collaboration, the ability to delegate tasks and to get my team to collaborate and work together. You're never going to accomplish something by yourself. You're always going to help other people. Other people are going to need to help you. I learned this in my senior design course. We built the jet-powered aircraft. We had 12 people on our team, and each one of us had our own jobs to do, but we all helped each other with what our specialty was. And I guess in terms of collaboration, one thing that really stuck with me is someone that I really respect when I was in college told me, you're always going to be producing something for someone else, or someone else is going to be producing something for you. And if you don't know what that person's going to do with the work you produce, then you're bound to fail. You're not going to give them the right thing. So ask questions, understand what someone's going to do with the work you produce, and try to get ahead of it and try to understand, well, maybe I can do something a little better and make their life a little easier downstream. But you can't do that unless you understand what the next person in line is going to do with your work.
Great. I hope that somebody wrote that down and tweets that out to our community, because that's a great nugget of knowledge that James just dropped on us. Heather, anything that you learned as a student that you still utilize or apply today?
Yeah, I'm sort of +1 on all of that, but specifically what Chad mentioned. So I would say presentation, writing, and communication skills. So I'm required to know and understand technical concepts, but we always say at Blue, you can be the most sort of technical skilled engineer, but if you can't speak or write about your ideas, they're never going to go anywhere. And at Blue, we actually use a memo system to make very big engineering decisions. So being able to write clearly and concisely is really, really important. And also presentation skills, because those just come up pretty much throughout your entire career. This is case in point, right? And like, I've got a great example of that this year. You never know if you like those things and if you're good at them, you never know sort of what opportunities are going to come up that you can take advantage of. So like a good example is this week we had a Blue Origin launch, and we actually had an internal webcast with our employees, and I was asked to moderate that panel, and there were 2,000 employees that showed up for that. And that's really fun, right? Like I got to connect with 2,000 Blue Origin people this week, and that's not stuff that you would get to take advantage of if you didn't enjoy this and had practiced it. So I think that's really important. The other thing I would say is leadership skills. If you can get that in college, if you're like part of a hands-on team, or if you can lead your capstone team or sort of anything like that, that is really, really important experience as well, because it'll help you be a better manager in the future.
Brilliant, thanks. And that applies to both extroverts and introverts alike. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that we can hear Nicole and have Nicole have a chance to say hi from the field from Skydio. Nicole?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry, part of my job is obviously flying. We're on our way to a military test site, but did you hear any of my background at all?
No, we did not. So you want to go ahead and just say hello? Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, yes. So I'm Nicole. I'm head of flight testing at Skydio. My degree is in unmanned aircraft systems from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. After graduation, I started working for Google as a flight test engineer on their undercover project wing. And after Google moved on to Karma and got into more of the consumer drone industry as the flight validation lead. And now I'm with Skydio as head of flight testing for both consumer, enterprise, and commercial grade UAS.
So Nicole, are any of the skills that you utilize in your job today things that you learned when you were a student, or did you have to learn them on the fly? But I'll be here all day, folks.
that was a good one. Very good question. I would say some of the technical skills I took from classes like robotics, sensors, and programming, I still use those today. But a lot of my experience just comes from real world use of drones, joining clubs that were at my university, drone clubs, RC clubs, and getting hands-on experience was where I really valued, getting to learn more technical aspects of what I do today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And so I think our next question is a little bit similar in the sense that, what the skills that you're looking for in the students when you all hire them, either as a hiring manager or as a company or organization as a whole. Can you talk a little bit about some of what you're looking for For qualified applicants, you've talked quite a bit about the professional skills. There's also the hard technical skills. So when you're flipping through resumes or cover letters or in interviews, what is it that you're looking for these applicants to show you or tell you or demonstrate to you? And let's go ahead and start with Chad.
So I can't really speak particulars on NASA's hiring practices, but myself, when I'm going through resumes, I've got 5 or 6 I'm going through today. Need to make a decision next week. I've already spoken about the communication skills. That's hard to get on a resume. So I'll look at what extra activities the candidate has worked on. Has he or she worked on hands-on a project, led a project? The GPA is great, but NASA already has a pre-established threshold for GPAs that you can slide in. But what you've actually executed on in projects or extracurriculars and your hobbies come into play for me. Not necessarily speaking for NASA as a whole, but for me, when I'm looking at individual resumes, those are the things that I look for.
Brilliant. James, I know you've done quite a bit of hiring as a small part of what you do yourself. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're looking for in candidates and what students should be doing now to kind of get the skills that you're talking about?
Sure. Yeah. I guess for everyone's knowledge, we are a member of the North Carolina Space Grant internship program. We have 3 or 4 summer interns here every summer, and we have about at least a 50% high retention rate on the interns that we get, and then we extend full-time offers to the ones that we're impressed with. And I think a skill that I think everyone can learn in college and really at any time is figuring out a way to automate your kind of day-to-day workflow, things that you're doing constantly over and over and over again. I always tell people on my team, I'm like, do it once, figure it out, then figure out a way to automate it, and then teach someone to do it, and then move on to something else. If you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, you're doing something wrong because you're wasting time. So automation, I think, is key. So learning like a scripting language like VBA, Excel, Python, MATLAB, and anything you can learn and pick up to try to automate, menial tasks and free yourself up to do more free thinking and problem solving. And that's really what I look for in resumes, especially folks coming out of school, because everyone has the same course load, everyone's taking the same engineering classes, but what additional tools are you familiar with? Have you gone outside the box and figured out tools that maybe the university doesn't offer? Like if you picked up different FEA tools that the university doesn't offer, just because you were interested in it, that to me is a sign of someone that it's going to be a really good employee.
Great. Now, Heather, I'm sure you hear this a lot as someone who works in university relations from both sides in the middle. What is it that you're hearing?
Yeah, that's such a great question. +1 to all of what James said as well. Always looking for people who are sort of doing things outside of classwork. For us, that means we're looking for people who have a ton of hands-on engineering experience. So as a student, I think sort of like the best thing you can do is join a hands-on engineering team. And it doesn't have to be the university's rocket team. You can build cars or boats or bikes or underwater submarines. Like it doesn't matter as long as you're getting the experience of the full life cycle of an engineering project. So designing, building, testing, breaking, redesigning, rebuilding, retesting sort of over and over again. We also look for people who have a deep passion for space and our mission and, spending time doing those things sort of outside of class. And then, I mentioned, looking for people with leadership experience is a plus, especially if that's been part of a hands-on team. I think at Blue, the one thing that that we also focus on, not just having this great sort of technical ability, but actually looking for people who are going to be a culture add for us, meaning that they're really interested in a diverse and inclusive workplace and providing space for everyone to bring their best selves to Blue. That is incredibly important to us. And honestly, what it boils down to is just people being kind. So we look for kind people.
Great. And I'm not sure if Nicole is going to still, there's Nicole. Great. So I know that Skydio is growing quickly in leaps and bounds and is becoming quite large. What skills are you looking for? Like, do people need to have certified pilots, or do they need to know the FAA regs, or do they just need to have a really good pair of field boots?
Very good question. Specifically for my team, they should have their Part 107, which is your unmanned aircraft license to operate UAS, and then commercially. In addition to that, though, I look for real world experience, whether that's through clubs at university, through internships. And third, I would say what unique aspects they bring to the team that we don't have already. Like a previous candidate said, cultural fit, whether it's something on the team that no one else has experience in. So just something that's very unique that they can bring to the team for sure.
Okay, great. So I know that some of our current seniors and those also in graduate and earning their PhDs have this question that I think is really specific to this year. And James, just as a heads up, this is going to come to you first. So this year was obviously a really unique year with COVID. So in a lot of instances, doors were shut to internships, summer jobs, working as teams, working in labs. So some of the graduating students are feeling like, wow, I just might not have this gap. So what should these students do to show that they were gaining all the great skills that you were just expressing, but in a year during COVID when things might have been a little bit tough? What should these students be doing to get their foot in the door in an otherwise really tough year? James?
Wow, that's a hard question. I mean, I agree. It's been tough,
Yeah, we've got some really smart students.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been really tough on the students and the teachers. It's been tough on business owners. It's been tough on employees. It's been tough on people running small teams of people. It's been tough all around for different reasons. My perspective is like I'm ready to get the whole team back together and start making progress on work again. I feel like working remotely is good for a short term, but long term it's not very good for a group atmosphere or pushing a team further along and having everybody learn from each other, and that tribal knowledge that you just gain from working in a group and watching how people solve problems. That's something we've been lacking in the industry, and I hope from just a short amount of time that that the students kind of see that too. Like they maybe miss collaborative work and miss working side by side with people, because you do learn from each other. Right. You don't know that you are, but like sitting next to somebody, you just learn how they solve problems, and what they know, and who to go to if you have a similar problem, because they know how to solve it. That translates into the industry. So I guess what to do to set yourself apart and to show that you haven't missed out on that. I guess you don't have to. We all know you've missed out on it. We've missed out on it. I don't think it's something you have to like make excuses for. You went to school, you were a senior in COVID, and it's been hard, and you probably missed out on some stuff. But everyone is in the same position as you, right? So I don't know. Maybe that's not the answer you wanted, but.
Nope, I think you're right. I think that's life, and I think I'm sure Chad's gonna back on how one communicates about this experience may have something to do with it. But I will. I'm gonna go to Heather. And I will also circle back around with Liz, and she's going to probably get to combine a couple of questions there. But Heather, what should graduating students do given COVID and gaps they might have in their resumes?
Yeah, this is such a great question. I agree with James again, too. So at Blue, we were fortunate enough to host interns throughout the pandemic. They were virtual, but most students actually had a great experience still with their engineering teams, and we were able to be productive. So that was good. We were really fortunate there. just for students, I think, you know, anything that you can do to sort of get that design build experience is a plus. Even if you're doing projects at home, that's great. That's terrific. Focusing on school this year is great too. And just sort of taking care of yourself and your loved ones, I think, is really important. As a company, we expect to see a hole this year, and it's totally okay with us if you had to take a break. Like we get it, we understand, and you know, we'll take that into account when we're looking at applications.
Great, thanks, Nicole. Are there gaps that you're seeing with expanding the company, new younger folks coming in, maybe with some gaps in their resumes, and what is it that you're looking for, or that you think some of these students can do given other COVID parameters?
Yeah, great question. I think students can what Heather stated, do single projects on your own to enhance your ability to learn, right? Don't just kind of stay stagnant. And also how people have approached working with teams still remotely, right? With your students, even if it's kind of like working on prototypes and you drop one off at a person's house and they work on it. How are you still working as a team remotely in getting through this time and still continuing to learn? Obviously, it's really hard with the decrease in internships, et cetera, but as long as you're still gaining experience and doing, you know, single-handed projects on your own, I think that's what I'm looking for.
Sandy, I think you're muted.
That was inevitable at some point, right? I'm glad it was me. So Liz, I'm going to give you a chance to kind of double team those last questions. So what is it that you're really looking for in your hires? And are you seeing any gaps right now, or how are you asking young professionals to fill in those gaps given COVID?
So I'm going to take a slightly different approach and say, because this has been such a challenging year across the board, did you do something outside of your normal expertise or your normal training? You know, did you go volunteer at a mass vaccination site? Did you go lend your skills to something like, you know, Habitat for Humanity, or just giving back to your community? It's important for all of us to also be, you know, active members of our community and giving back to our society. So that's kind of a slightly different take. And then one other aspect, you know, we were all talking about what types of skills are we looking for in new hires. Creativity. You know, do you have hobbies like in art? You know, are you a photographer, a painter? Do you have something outside of work that keeps your brain engaged in a different way? That's just kind of a different take.
That's great. I took some Spanish classes, and it's occurring to me that if for those of you that were listening to Astronaut Cardman earlier today, maybe it's a good time to pick up some of those Russian skills if you're looking to become an astronaut and fly up on the Soyuz. Chad, is there anything that you want to add for students who may feel that this is just a really tough year to build their experience?
So for NASA, kind of like Blue, we were pretty lucky. We didn't have a gap in our internship. We kept bringing people on. Granted, the environment was drastically different. We had folks who were tele-interning. It sounds odd, you know, especially if you're going to do an internship at Kennedy Space Center and you can't go into the VAB. That's a bit of a drag, right? But change your expectations. You still get some of the experience. Currently today, I have 3 interns working in my branch, UCF, University of Puerto Rico, and Embry-Riddle. I have a Caltech Ph.D. coming on here in a couple of weeks. So, and we also had another Embry-Riddle student who interned during the pandemic, and we hired him, and he's never been on center. So just change the expectation, still apply, and also keep in mind that a NASA internship, you know, they're pretty hard to get, but we also have people or contractors working on center the Ares Corporation, Jacobs Engineering. Internships with those guys also, are still hands-on, still here at NASA, Kennedy Space Center. So if you're looking for a NASA internship per se, it's not just NASA. There's several other companies that also support the Artemis mission.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chad. So this next one's going to go to Heather first. So students are curious to know, what was the most important choice you made to get you to where you are today? And what can you tell others to do that you learned that was successful?
Yeah, this is such an interesting question. I guess I would say be open to new opportunities and be willing to pivot into something that might be a stretch for you. So I had always considered myself a technical person, and moving into more of a technically adjacent role was really tough. It was a really hard decision. But it opened the door to working at Blue, and that has been the opportunity of a lifetime. So I'm really glad that I did it. And you never know who you're going to meet and who will help open that door. So always be willing to talk to people and network in the industry that you really want to work in, because you just never know what might come of it.
Great, thanks. Heather, is there a decision that you made at some point that got you to where you are today? Or is there some piece of advice from maybe a pathway or a pivot that you had in your career that you'd like to share?
Did you mean Nicole?
I did mean Nicole. I'm like looking right at her at the screen too. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is don't be complacent and stagnant. Push yourself in your career and your technical ability. A lot of times I see people just staying where they are because they're comfortable, but that doesn't necessarily get you to the next best thing. And this was a big thing for me. I was very comfortable and complacent. And when the opportunity for GoPro came up, I took it because I needed to be challenged. And so challenge yourself internally always, and that's going to get you very far.
Great. Liz?
So this wasn't so much a choice that I made, but it's more of a piece of advice, and it is take an active role. So it's a little bit of a +1 on what Nicole just said. Don't be afraid to ask for what you want. You can't get it if you're not working, together with other people. Support people around you, and build yourself a support network of friends. It's something that I've been in this industry for a long time, but just in the past year and a half have I really felt the importance of supporting others and getting their support not just in a team, but just my peers. So ask for help and ask for what you want, because you might get it.
Brilliant advice, brilliant advice. I know a lot of students who are minorities and females come up with the question of asking. And so I think that's a really great piece of advice. What about you, Chad?
So my answer is going to be a little bit unpopular. So when you ask what, in my career choice, what choice did I make that made a difference? I did not take the highest paying job. I took the job that satisfied me the most and made me excited about coming to work. I quite literally, when I graduated NC State, I had multiple offers on the table from various government agencies and private industry, and I took the lowest paying job because it was the most exciting to me to be able to participate in space exploration. So it's not always about the dollar. So might not be popular with a lot of folks just getting out of college and having college loans, but it's honest truth.
No, we appreciate the honest truth here at North Carolina Space Grant. What about you, James? Something that was an important choice that you made? I'm guessing maybe starting your own company might be up there, but what do you have to share?
Well, I guess we'll see in about 10 years, right? I don't really have a single thing I can remember that was like a fork in the road. I guess this is probably the biggest thing right now that the new new office and new company in Raleigh. Well, I guess maybe to echo something that Liz said, you know, don't be afraid to ask, but also don't be afraid to have the tough conversations with people, whether it's your coworkers or your boss. If you're unhappy with somebody, don't let it linger, right? Be matter of fact and be to the point, you know, but you know, don't let something upset you to the point that you're ready to like quit and walk away, because a lot of people don't know the situation you're in. They don't even know if you're upset, or they don't know if, you know, you're having a hard time, right? So yeah, just don't be afraid to have the tough conversations. It's a work environment, it's a workplace, you know, and that's how people are going to view the things that you bring up to them.
Yeah, that's really great advice, especially the points that we heard earlier from folks about the importance of working as a team. And earlier what astronaut Cardman said specifically about working in really tough, tight environments with other people. Sometimes you just got to keep it real. So we appreciate your real comments from everybody. All right, so we've got a next question, and I think at this point, are we starting with Nicole? Hopefully I'll get that right. Nicole, so folks want to know, if you're still there, yep, you are, what is the most rewarding project that you've ever worked on and why, and how did you come to be involved?
I like that question. Most rewarding for me was the GoPro Karma project I was on. I get to understand consumer products, the life cycle of hardware, the life cycle of software, how important it is to design test cases and test against both the software and hardware before you give it out to real world customers, right? You're looking at a zero fault system when customers are flying this on their own. And so you want to make sure your system is very robust. So pushing out my first consumer product was probably the most rewarding for me.
Very cool. Liz?
I'm going to say the most rewarding project that I've worked on was when I worked in mission control with human research experiments on the space station. And it was the people, it wasn't necessarily the project or the mission, it was the people I was working with. That was a team in the best sense of the word. It was people that I knew had my back. They had my, you know, I had their back, but also we had to be so good. We were not shy about giving each other very honest feedback, and we had to take that feedback and learn from it. So my most rewarding experience was working in a dynamic, high pressure environment, but it was the team, the people around me that made it so.
That's great. Yep, that's often the case. And I'm one of those lucky people who can say that about my team. Chad, what about you? What's the most rewarding project that you've worked on and why? And how did you come about being involved?
I'd say my current mission, working the Artemis mission here at Kennedy Space Center, is probably the most exciting job that I've ever had. Playing a key role in it. We're going to launch one of the world's most powerful launch vehicles and take a spacecraft to a human-ready spacecraft to the furthest point anyone has ever been before, even beyond what Saturn did back in the Apollo days. I've been a part of the team now for some time. You know, we took Kennedy Space Center, that was basically just a government rocket institute, if you will. We only launched the shuttle. We had some military launches here and there. Today, we have SLS and Orion being launched by NASA with its commercial partners. We have Blue Origin, who's built a magnificent facility here on Center, and they're going to be launching here shortly. SpaceX have got their crew flights launching. We have Boeing bringing their SDS-100 online. So it's a very exciting time to be at Kennedy and working the Artemis mission. How I got involved, I worked back in a constellation program when we were originally going to the moon, and I was recognized for being not a tactical thinker. I was more strategic. I'm looking at a long-term plan. What does this center look like? How do we implement mobile launchers versus MLT versus MLPs, mobile launch platform, or mobile launch towers. So I got recognized for doing that. So I've got lucky enough to be given the function of doing doing architectural assessments for the center, and eventually grew into and created a job called advanced planning. And that's how I kind of evolved into this. So it's very exciting. I'm very proud and happy to be a part of the Artemis mission.
Yeah, I'm sure the next generation certainly is as well. So James, obviously you can answer this however you see fit, but I want to add a little sub element to this question, if I may. I know a lot of students here, I mean, they know about maybe NASA, SpaceX, Blue, ULA that we heard from earlier. I was wondering too, if you could talk about maybe how you get involved in some of these projects when students haven't maybe heard about like some of the smaller companies or smaller businesses or subcontractors, and maybe take a little bit of that angle for a part B of how you might answer the question. So some of us all know the big names, you know, the acronyms on the side of the rocket, but they may not know the folks that, for example, develop the software that makes that happen. So maybe if you could also talk about it as like we heard earlier about these like subs or subcontractors or small businesses. But obviously it's up to you to answer how you see fit.
No, I mean, that's very interesting. I appreciate that, because that kind of puts me in a different headspace, because I mean, really that's the situation we're in. We are considered a supplier to all of these big space launch and aerospace companies. And so it's not, you're right. It's not just the big names. It's hundreds of different engineering firms and suppliers and small shops that really help make these things possible. And they can be just as rewarding to work at as one of the big names. And sometimes more so, because you do get exposed to a lot of different industries and different companies and different ways of doing business. I guess in terms of like, what is the most impactful or exciting project I've worked on, I can't really think of one off the top of my head. I mean, there's been a few, but really anytime I see designs that either I've produced or someone on our team has produced, whenever I see those designs fly, whether it's on a spacecraft, an aircraft, a wind turbine, we do bike frames. I mean, anytime you see your parts being made, doesn't matter what it is, it's very fulfilling. It makes it all worth it. It makes all the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into it worth it, because you know that you've made a good product and you're proud of it, right? And you want to share that with people and show the world. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. A lot of big companies don't let you talk about what you've done with them, but yeah.
Great. No, I totally get that. I know that we certainly feel that way about our students. They're not products, they're people, but I know we have that similar feeling of pride. So Heather, what about you? What was some kind of important choice you made that got you to where you are today? Earlier, you talked a little bit about taking the plunge from into a new position and going to Blue. What would you like to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually sort of a perfect segue, because I think the most exciting project that I've ever gotten the opportunity to work on is building Blue Origin. So going from 300 employees to 4,000. I hired hundreds of those people, and now they build space vehicles, and that is like just really dang exciting. When we were about 400 people, we flew New Shepard for the first time, and I will never ever forget what it was like to be in that room on that day and see that rocket fly. We didn't have enough people at that point. We had actually painted the vehicle ourselves, so just like watching that go to space, and just to know that we had touched that and just sort of, you know, helped it lift off was just really, really spectacular. So I would say building Blue, specifically for me, the internship program. I stood that program up, and when I got hired at Blue, I got hired as the university relations person. But in between the time that I was hired and when I started, the internship program manager quit. And so on my second day at Blue Origin, the president came to me and was like, "So do you think that you could do sort of both of these jobs?" And, you know, I was like, "Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that sounds great." And I honestly had no idea what I was getting myself into. But to see those interns who have now converted to full-time employees still walking around Blue, you know, and just having a hand in that, it's one of the most satisfying things I've ever experienced as an employee.
That's great. So a lot of our conversation has centered around, college students, those who are graduating, and young professionals. But we do have some K through 12 students and educators out there who would also like to hear what message you might have for those really just coming up and starting. And maybe again, what would you like to say to someone that's in high school or middle school or any of their educators? And we'll go ahead and start with Liz.
So my message is to stay and be curious people. Ask questions. I believe that every single one of us is born a scientist. I have a bias, I'm a scientist. But then many of us become really cool engineers. But what kid do you know is not full of questions? So that's why I believe we're all born scientists. Foster that. Put the phone down, go outside, look at a patch of dirt and check out all the living little critters and why, look at the world around you. Be curious and open your eyes and be an observer of nature. There's my advice.
That's brilliant. And I know that astronaut Cardman, covered in mud, would absolutely agree with that sentiment. Chad, what do you want to say to the other elementary, middle school, and high school students out there and their educators, whether formal or informal, or even, as we learned from our students earlier, homeschooled?
I currently have 2 of those in my house, and I always encourage them. Well, one, to get off the Xbox and get off the iPad, but always ask questions. I've shared with what I agree with what Liz was saying. Always ask why. My son was asking me some questions the other day about the sun, just out of the blue. How big is it? How much energy is coming out? I didn't know he was preparing for a science test, but we ask those questions. You can always, some people say there's about the stupid question. You don't know what you don't know until you ask. You can't just sit around and wait for somebody to give you an answer if you don't ask. So I challenge my kids all the time to ask questions. Why is the sky blue? I mean, why does the current flow that way? Always ask those questions. Encourage both my kids to be members of clubs. They're in the future problem solving teams and compete with future problem solving. I'm not sure if the state of North Carolina has that like they do here in Florida. I'm confident you do. They're both on those teams. They're on swim teams, and they're both into music. So it's not just a hard fact science side, it's also the soft side. I myself was a photographer. I did wedding photography for a long time and, competed with it. So there's both. Ask questions and do different things.
Cool. Heather, what do you have to say to our next generation of explorers?
Oh my gosh, yes, all of that. Yeah, being curious is so important, and truly a lifelong learner, right? That goes all the way from K-12 through college, and then of course through your adult life. If you stop learning, you're not going to come up with the next great thing. I also want to just reiterate sort of what Liz said about being creative. So really fostering your creativity, because it'll help you think outside the box and solve the really challenging problems that we have ahead of us, both in science and engineering, all of STEM, right? So I think that is really important. But yeah.
Great. So James, you hire interns. Let's speak to the ones that you're going to be your interns in about 10 to 15 years. What would you have to say to some of those kids now and their educators and their parents?
That's a big speaking to a lot of people.
No pressure. No pressure.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one big message that I would have is try to build on what others have done first, and don't try to reinvent the wheel always. It can always seem like a monumental task and overwhelming if you look at something and say, I've got to do this all on my own from scratch. Well, that's not the case. Break it up into small, anything you have to do, break it up into small pieces. And I guarantee 90% of those pieces have been solved by someone somewhere. So, research, figure out ways to solve problems and the ways that other people have done it and tweak them and apply it to your problem. I mean, as an engineer, we do that day in and day out. If you're spending a lot of time reinventing the wheel, that's a problem because someone has probably solved it in a different way. And you just need to find that and reapply it. I think maybe Jeff Bezos had a very similar message to people about how he started Blue Origin, because he could not have started Blue Origin if he had to reinvent the postal system and reinvent PayPal and a way to pay people online. Like, he stood on the backs of all these people that did great things before him, and he found a way to make a profitable company out of nothing, right? So there's all this heavy industry around you. There's all these tools and things that people have built. Figure out a way to build something on the back of them, right?
Brilliant, thanks. And Nicole, many still view the UAS or drone industry as something that's new and emerging and evolving. And I know that even speaking to, my 7-year-old nephew who has about 5 of them, obviously not Skydio yet. What would you say to these kids and their educators coming up about your sector and where you think it's going to go and what they should be doing?
Yeah, I would say it's a lot of people already mentioned this, but you're never too young to start learning and tinkering with what you're actually really passionate about. And if that is, aviation and aircraft and UAVs, I mean, you can start flying them from a very early age. Buy some small minis and start figuring out how to manually fly. Start designing your own UAS and buying the ESCs and the motors and the body and see what it all entails, from the electricals to the software to manually flying them. And just don't be afraid to deep dive into what really makes you passionate. And I think Chad mentioned this, joining clubs in your local area. I mean, for me, there's a bunch of RC clubs in the local area you can go to, and it's pretty crazy when you just go to local clubs. It's all ranges of age, and you can get so much experience from people who are older and younger, who've designed their own airplanes, who've been flying for years. And that in itself is just such a good educational influence when you're around people who have the same passion for you as you do.
Great, that's fantastic. And we've got some questions too that are about how to get people to think in an interdisciplinary nature and all that. And we're going to close out and we don't have time, but in everything that folks mentioned here, I mean, don't forget to reach out to your business students and your art students and your communication students to serve as part of these teams, because you're going to need somebody to do fundraising. You're going to need somebody to run your social media. You might hire someone in the School of Education to do the outreach program for you. So we've still got a couple of questions popping up in the Q&A. And of course, our panelists are welcome to pop in there and help answer them. However, that said, we have come to the end of this session. I cannot believe how quickly this hour has flown by. But I want to thank all of our panelists for participating.